If you're listening to this video, you're probably like me, a big fan of the Harry Potter series and the Wizarding World. It's not hard to fall in love with the story. A young boy named Harry, who lost his parents, had to grow up with his only living relatives, the mean old Dursleys. On his 11th birthday, he meets a giant-sized man named Hagrid, who tells him he's a wizard. Harry discovers that not only is he a wizard, but he's the chosen one who must defeat the darkness and save the Wizarding World. His previous life of living with the spiders under the stairs gets filled with friendship and love, but also sadness and pain. There are times while you're reading you'll laugh, but other times you'll cry. It's a world you can imagine is real, and you want to be a part of it. It's a fantastic story. But in most stories, we only get what's on the page, so there is much more to the world that we aren't given. This is often referred to as an iceberg theory. If you were to see an iceberg in the ocean, you would only see the tip of something much more significant. That tip is what we get on the pages of the book. However, the wider picture or deeper meanings are underneath the surface and not on the pages. Today we will explore Harry Potter and the Iceberg Under the Sea. This video is divided into 7 tiers with 5 topics in each. As we progress down the tiers, the topics will become less laid out in the books. I'll touch on each briefly, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I'll have solo videos on several of these with a deeper dive. So without further ado, let's start at the top of the iceberg with Tier 1. Love and Death. Love and death are significant themes throughout the Harry Potter series. The story itself starts off with notes of death. Harry Potter's parents die, leaving him alone in the world. Dumbledore comes up with a plan using the power of sacrificial love to protect Harry if he resides in the home of his only blood relative, Aunt Petunia Dursley. Harry suffers several losses, including those he cares for or loves, like his godfather, Sirius Black, classmate Cedric Diggory, and magical creature friend Dobby. Many more deaths throughout the story affect Harry due to his ability to love, which makes him stronger. On the other hand, Voldemort, the dark wizard who threatens the wizarding world as we know it, cannot love due to his dark nature. He sees death happening all around him without being fazed. He even causes death, making him weaker in the end. Harry goes on to learn significant lessons about death. Even from the first book, Dumbledore tries to explain that death is not something to be afraid of. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. Nearly 7 years later, Harry needs to be able to face death willingly and unafraid, and he does. Unlike Harry, Voldemort fears death, or rather his own death. He does unspeakable evil things to try to protect himself from ever dying, yet in the end he dies loveless, alone, as a mortal man, by essentially his own doing. Harry's life gets filled with more love than he probably ever imagined. He finds fantastic friends who do anything for each other. He finds a wife who has loved him ever since she first saw him. He gains a family he always deserved to have, and he even has his own children, who will be raised surrounded by love. The Prophecy. In the wizarding world, there are those with seer abilities. They can see visions of the future that may come to pass. Some witches and wizards don't put too much stock in this, but there are enough that do that the Ministry of Magic created an enormous hall filled with recorded prophecies. During the series, we hear 2 prophecies. The first happened before where we pick up in the story, and the other one is a little over halfway in. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. This is the prophecy that Voldemort discovers a part of, causing him to go after Harry as a baby. Without this prophecy, Harry might have grown up to have a normal childhood with both of his parents alive, or he could have been raised in the middle of a very dark period due to the Wizarding World. Either way, when Voldemort learned of the prophecy, it altered Harry's life path and started our journey with him. The second prophecy we learn is, "It will happen tonight. The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will break free and set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again with the servant's aid, greater and more terrible than he ever was. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will set out to rejoin his master." This is thought to refer to Peter Pettigrew. He betrayed Harry's parents, leading to their death. It also might refer to Barty Crouch Jr., who was once locked up in Askaban for being a Death Eater. He managed to escape with the help of his mother. His father kept his mouth shut about what they did and hid his son from the public. Barty Crouch Jr. would also make his way back to Voldemort. I think these two prophecies and those in the ministry are taken seriously because the seemingly unconscious seer gives them. The seer doesn't realize they're speaking a prophecy. They could think they just zoned out or nodded off for a moment. It's unlike other forms of divination, like reading tea leaves, where there's some room for interpretation. Horcruxes. A Horcrux is an object that holds a piece of a dark witch or wizard's soul. If their physical body dies, a piece of them still exists in the world, which they will be able to use to come back to life. An object must be selected to create a Horcrux. Then, the worst act imaginable is completed. You must take someone else's life, release their soul from their body to allow your soul to split into the object you selected for the Horcrux. At this point, some dark magic is used to complete this act. It's a horrible thought to do this even once, but Voldemort wanted to split his soul into 7 fragments, 7 being a magical number. Protective measures are often taken to keep the Horcruxes safe from others who can find them and destroy the object. We see some of these protections throughout the series. The diary was the least protected. It was just given to Lucius Malfoy to hold on to, but on the other hand, it did have the power to possess anyone who wrote inside of it. Later, we see how the Gaunt Ring Horcrux is protected by a curse that could lead to death, but I think the most protected Horcrux is the locket. It was very well hidden in a cave from Voldemort's childhood, a cave very few people alive would know about. It was placed inside of a basin in the middle of a lake filled with inferi. You would have to drink the liquid in the basin to receive the locket. When we see Dumbledore do this, it seems like he's living a nightmare, speaking out loud about regrets and fears. This liquid would weaken you to the point that you couldn't leave. Others have tried, like Regulus Black, but did not survive. So not only is it hard to retrieve, but it's also hard to destroy. Only certain things can destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes. The longer you hold onto the locket, the harder it becomes to destroy it. What I mean by this is that wearing the locket can bring out the worst thoughts, feelings, or traits. We see Ron Weasley get significantly affected by the locket, causing him to abandon the Horcrux hunt with Harry and Hermione temporarily. So, to bring it all back, Horcruxes can help a dark witch or wizard live a second life. Voldemort wanted to create several Horcruxes to avoid ever dying forever since he feared death so much. Ultimately, Voldemort dies and doesn't even get an afterlife because he destroyed his soul so badly. The Sorting Hat. So I debated putting the Sorting Hat further down the tier list. There's a lot we don't know about the hat, but we see a fair bit of it throughout the books. The Sorting Hat was once the Hogwarts founder Godric Gryffindor's hat. All 4 founders put a bit of themselves into the hat. Not like a Horcrux, but more similar to adding memories and personality into the Hogwarts portraits. The hat gets placed on each of the new Hogwarts first-year students. It will determine what house the student will be sorted into. The hat seems to be sentient. It likes to sing a song before the sorting ceremony begins, often giving a story or warning. The hat has the ability of legitimacy or reading minds because it can tell what new students are thinking or feeling and uses that knowledge in the sorting process. Sometimes there is a hat stall where it takes more than 5 minutes to sort a student. Minerva McGonagall was a hat stall and was a toss-up between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, with Gryffindor winning. The hat will claim it's never sorted incorrectly, though many have questioned why they were sorted as such. One question I would have is, why on earth was Peter Pettigrew sorted into Gryffindor? Yes, he might value strength and bravery, but come on. Other magical worlds. During the Goblet of Fire, we get a glimpse into other wizarding schools. Beauxbaton and Durmstrang students travel to Hogwarts to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. Now, if you're a movie-only person, you might think that those schools are single-gender, but as explained in the book, you know that's not true. I wouldn't be surprised if they went that route for the movies just to make it easier to tell the 2 schools apart, with several new faces appearing on the screen. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, we get a glimpse into Ilvermorny, the US-based magical school. These movies show us much more than just the knowledge of other schools. We get a glimpse into the magical government and leaders in different areas of the world. In the first three Harry Potter books, you might believe that Hogwarts is the only place to learn magic. Then the door opens into a larger world. There are 11 major schools worldwide. Some students are homeschooled. Several, if not in every country, they have their own magical government. There's also so much beyond the page that I couldn't even scratch the surface in this video, but the books let us know that magic is everywhere. Tier 2. Defense Against the Dark Art Curse. In Harry's first year, Professor Quill is a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. By the end of the year, he dies after he attempts to bring Voldemort back to power. The following year, Gilderoy Lockhart took with the position. Again, it's only for that year, as Lockhart ends up in the long-term ward at St. Mungo's Hospital. Year after year, a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher would come and go. While this all seems odd, it comes down to a jinx or curse that was placed on the position years ago. We learn that in Voldemort's youth, as Tom Riddle, he tried to apply for the position. When he first graduated from Hogwarts, he applied but was told he was too young. Years later, he would return and try again when Dumbledore became headmaster. Of course, knowing that Riddle was creating a force of dark wizards, Dumbledore denied him the job. Riddle then cursed the position that no one longer than a year could hold the job. This was something that was in place until either he lifted it himself or he dies. We know that at some point, Voldemort wanted Snape to be the professor so he could watch out for Dumbledore and possibly recruit more Death Eaters. Dumbledore hired him, but put him in the Potions Master position. Dumbledore would be well aware of the curse and wanted to watch out for Snape. Plus, Snape was on the verge of flipping sides to protect Lily Potter and her family, if needed, from Voldemort. If Snape had initially gotten the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Voldemort probably would have lifted the curse as he trusted Snape and wanted him to succeed in their mission. This could lead to a very interesting what-if theory. Let me know if you want me to dive into that. The curse Voldemort placed, in a way, cursed himself. He lost the chance to return in Harry's first year at Hogwarts after getting defeated and losing someone willing to help him. In Harry's second year, Lockhart's incompetence led to Harry having to face the Chamber of Secrets. Harry is also the only one who could have opened the chamber. If Lockhart hadn't been there, they probably would have just closed down the school, meaning the Basilisk would still be alive, Ginny would be dead, and Voldemort's diary Horcrux would have returned to power. In the third year, Lupin comes to Hogwarts. This leads to Harry learning more about his parents, clearing the name of his godfather Sirius Black, or at least in Dumbledore's mind, learning how to fend off Dementors, and becoming a much stronger wizard. Year 4 had a bit of a wrench in it, as Barty Crouch Jr. was the professor using Polyjuice Potion. This was supposed to be Alastor Moody, who would have been an excellent teacher. However, Barty Crouch Jr. ends up teaching the unforgivable curses, which leads to Harry knowing how to fend off the Imperious Curse, which Voldemort would later try to use on Harry in the Forbidden Forest and fail. The following year, Dolores Umbridge came in. This led to the creation of Dumbledore's army, this generation's version of the Order of the Phoenix, a group of those willing to stand up against and fight the darkness. Harry becomes a teacher and builds a stronger group of students. It also leads to the mistrust of the Ministry, which Voldemort would later try to take over, but those against him had already taken a step back and had their eyes open to what's happening. Snape was an ex-professor. Was the curse lifted at this point? Probably not. Voldemort had other things on his mind to remember to do that. But having Snape as the DADA professor meant that they needed a new Potions Master, which brought in Horace Slughorn. Slughorn was the only one who knew how many Horcruxes young Tom Riddle wanted to create, as he once asked Slughorn about it when he was a student. This gave Dumbledore and Harry vital information to take down Voldemort. The following year, Death Eaters were brought in as teachers. They had taken over the school at the end of the previous year. Snape becomes headmaster, secretly trying his best to look after the students while being undercover Death Eater. More students join Dumbledore's army to fight against the Death Eaters. Neville manages to create a safe space inside the Room of Requirement for their members, a place where no Death Eater can enter. The room also created a pathway for the Order of the Phoenix members to enter during the battle. So each year, Harry was in school and had a new professor. Each year, Harry and others became stronger, and Voldemort got weaker. The curse backfired. Animagus. An Animagus is a witch or wizard who can transform themselves into an animal form. This is one of the first pieces of magic we see in Harry Potter, as McGonagall in her cat form is watching the Dursleys. We later discover that Harry's father and his friends become Animagi after becoming friends with Remus Lupin, who transforms into a werewolf once a month. They wanted to keep him company during this time so he wouldn't feel alone or ashamed. You retain most of your ability to think like a human in animal form, however emotions are simplified, and you gain the animal desires like prey hunting. You're supposed to go through a registration process when you gain this ability, However, not everyone does. Rita Skeeter, the journalist, transforms into a beetle and goes under covers to get stories, but she never registered. This is an illegal act that could end up with time in Azkaban. When knowing that 3 Hogwarts students are able to become animagi, you might wonder, why aren't there more? How hard can it be if students can do it? In fact, it's really hard. Let me explain. The process starts off with needing to keep a single leaf from a magic plant in your mouth for an entire month, from full moon to full moon. If you accidentally swallow it, you have to start over again. At the full moon, you'll remove the leaf seeped in your saliva and put it into a vial to receive the pure rays from the full moon. If it happens to be a cloudy night, start over with a new leaf. You'll need to add one of your hairs to the vial, and then add a silver teaspoon of dew collected from a place neither sunlight nor human feet have touched for 7 days. Next, you'll add a chrysalis from a death's head hawk moth. This mixture needs to be put in a quiet and dark place. You cannot look at it or disturb it until the next electrical storm, no matter how long that takes. During this waiting period, each day at sunrise and sunset, you must place the tip of your wand over your heart and speak an incantation. The chant is Amato, Amano, Amamato, Animagus. You may begin to feel a second heartbeat during this, but do not change anything you're doing. Do not disturb your vial. Any contamination could lead to needing to start over again. When the lightning finally appears in the sky, you must get your vial. If you did everything correctly, the vial should be filled with a blood red potion. Find a safe and secure location for your transformation. You'll perform the incantation one more time and drink the potion. This will lead to fiery pain and intense double heartbeat. But do not be afraid. You'll see a vision of the animal you'll be able to become. The first transformation is usually uncomfortable. Anything you wear, like clothes or glasses, melds with your body and becomes part of your fur, feathers, or scales, etc. Once you've completely transformed, it's best to find your wand and put it someplace for safekeeping. When you want to return to your human form, visualize yourself clearly as a human. Slipping in and out of your two forms will become easier with time and practice. Advanced witches and wizards can transform without using a wand. So, yeah, it's a challenging task. Time turners. Time travel is a tricky topic. Clear rules need to be laid out in order to avoid creating time loops, alternative timelines, or the ease of changing the plot. And I believe that is done. Well, at least in the original story. I'm ignoring the garbage that is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child here. The rules on time turners try to eliminate questions like, why didn't someone use a time turner to defeat Voldemort when he rose to power? Or why didn't they use it to save so-and-so? The Department of Mysteries within the Ministry studies time. They also conclude that time travel beyond 5 years is dangerous. A witch or wizard got trapped for 5 days in 1402. When she finally returned, she had aged the 5 centuries through which she had gone back in time. In the past, she also created disturbances. Some of the people she interacted with caused a rift that caused at least 25 descendants to vanish as if they were never born. Time itself was also affected. The Tuesday she returned lasted 2.5 days, while Thursday only lasted 4 hours. This was something hard to cover up. Time turners were limited to just a few hours, not to cause any more issues. Laws were put into place where they were very controlled. They may be used for trivial time problems, such as Hermione using it to attend more classes at Hogwarts, but they cannot be used for greater or more important purposes. Hermione and Harry using the time turner to save Buckbeak and Sirius Black would significantly violate this law, but lucky for them, no one other than Dumbledore noticed, and he never mentioned it. All the time turners the Ministry had would get destroyed during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries 3 years after Hermione used one in Hogwarts. Dementors. Dementors are one of the worst magical creatures in the wizarding world. A wraith-like creature covered in a dark cloak has the ability to suck out one's soul. They are the prison guards at Askaban. They will feed on the happiness of those around them, causing despair. Harry is significantly affected by Dementors. I can't say whether it's because Harry already has pain that could become worse, or the Dementors sense that there are 2 souls in him, like a double attack on Harry. Either way, when he first feels the effects, Remus Lupin is there to banish it and give Harry some chocolate to make him feel better. Dementors are symbols of depression. Life feels like it's filled with such sadness you can't do anything about it. You're helpless, hopeless. Then there's chocolate. Studies have shown that chocolate can release endorphins that temporarily increase your mood. This is how the two are connected in the story. It should be noted, though, that excess chocolate consumption will not benefit anyone and won't cure depression. That being said, I would really like some chocolate now. Divination. Divination is the art of foreseeing the future. It's also about gathering insight on the past, present, and future events. This was briefly touched on earlier, as prophecies are part of the divination field. As I said earlier, not everyone believes in divination. Professor Trelawney teaches divination at Hogwarts. While some of her students are very interested in what she has to say, many of them see her as a joke, despite the fact that many of the random things she says comes true. Trelawney comes from a line of witches with a gift of the inner eye, a rare trait. If not born with the gift, it is possible to learn certain forms of divination. The aid of a crystal ball or tea leaves can help gather insight. Centaurs also have their own way of practicing divination. They use the movement of the planets, moons, and stars. If you pay attention in the first book, you'll learn that they predicted Harry's death in the Forbidden Forest by Voldemort. Remember, Ferenzi, we are sworn not to set ourselves against the heavens. Have we not read what is to come in the movements of our planets? Do you not see that unicorn? Do you not understand why it is killed, or have the planets not let you in on the secret? I set myself against what is lurking in the forest bane, yes, with the humans, alongside me if I must. This was an argument with Ferenzi and Bane in the forest. At this moment, Quirrell is drinking unicorn blood, trying to keep the part of Voldemort attached to him alive. The Centaurs saw in the sky that Harry was supposed to be attacked by Voldemort. This is also why they don't join the battle at Hogwarts until after Harry has fallen in the forest. Whether they knew he could come back to life or not, I don't know, but they knew from the beginning what had to happen in the forest to have a shift in the war. Trelawney also had an early prediction that Dumbledore would die. During Christmas dinner in Harry's third year, Trelawney decided to come down from her tower to join those who stayed at the castle. Dumbledore stands up to draw her a chair to sit down on when, I dare not, headmaster. If I join the table, we shall be 13. Nothing can be more unlucky. Never forget that when 13 dine together, the first to rise will be the first to die. With some persuasion and hesitation, Trelawney sits down. Later in the meal, Harry and Ron stand up to leave. She worries which one stood up first. McGonagall makes a joke about it, and that's that. You see, it's not Harry or Ron that she had to worry about, but Dumbledore, as he was the first of 13 to rise when he offered her a seat. Scabbers, who is Peter Pettigrew, was also at the table, making what seemed like 12 actually 13. This isn't the first time the 13 Dine death prophecy comes into play, but that's for another video. Tier 3. Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's Army. The Order of the Phoenix was created during the First Wizarding War. Voldemort was rising, and the Ministry could only do so much within its limitations. So this rogue group of witches and wizards was founded to do what the Ministry couldn't. Interestingly enough, many of the members worked within the Ministry. Dumbledore's army was founded during the Second Wizarding War. This was a younger version of the Order. At the same time as the DA was forming within the walls of Hogwarts, the Order was reforming outside of it. Both groups used elements of spycraft. The Order created a way to send secret messages by use of Patronus. Harry uses Voldemort's visions to get a peek on the other side. On the flip side, Voldemort sends a false message to him that leads to the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Fred and George go on to create several items to use during war times. Extendable ears for listening in, instant darkness powder to travel without being seen, shield hats to protect your head from spells, and even decoy detonators to cause a distraction while you're doing something else. These secret groups also show the effects of war. Several original members had lost their lives while fighting. Those who did survive would be changed forever. The Longbottoms live in the long-term ward at St. Mungo's. Moody is missing limbs. Molly Weasley lost both of her brothers, who were in the Order. Many of the members of Dumbledore's army were also affected by the First Wizarding War. They either had family members who were in the Order or had family members who were attacked by Death Eaters. Both of these groups were founded to be like a military. The Ministry has Aurors, which can be thought of as the police, but they don't really have a military branch. There's so much more to be discussed about the Order of the Phoenix group and the book itself, but that can be for another day. At some point, I want to create a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of all 7 books. Secret Keepers. A secret keeper is someone who holds hidden information with the assistance of the Fidelius charm. The secret is embedded within their soul. When a secret keeper is chosen, the person who passed on the information can no longer speak of the secret. Only the secret keeper can. The keeper could tell as many people as they wanted to, but only voluntarily. The secret cannot be bewitched or tortured out of them. We discover that the Potters are hidden under the Fidelius charm, with Peter Pettigrew as their secret keeper. Dumbledore had initially offered to be their keeper, but they turned it down. I believe there was a slight mistrust, knowing that he had recently hired Snape, a known Death Eater, at Hogwarts. Unknown to them, Snape asked Dumbledore to keep them in hiding and protect them from Voldemort, who believed Harry was the child mentioned in the prophecy. Sirius Black was their first choice, but they changed it to Pettigrew at the last minute because he would be less obvious. This would end up backfiring, as Pettigrew was a rat. He went to Voldemort and told him where they were, leading to their deaths. During Harry's third year at Hogwarts, we see a confrontation between Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Black shouts, "Believe me, Harry, I never betrayed James and Lily. I would have died before I betrayed them." Most people take this line as an exaggerated way of saying he would never turn his back on his friends. But listen to it again, remembering that the secret cannot be tortured out of a wizard. The secret is embedded within their soul. I would have died before I betrayed them. Sirius Black would have been tortured to death. He literally would have died if he didn't betray his friends. When a secret keeper dies, two things can happen. If they tell anyone else, they become the new secret keepers. We see this happen to Grimmauld Place after Dumbledore died. But let's say the secret keeper didn't tell anyone. The secret would stay intact as their soul passes on. So if Sirius was the Potter secret keeper and the Death Eaters killed him, the Potters would be hidden within their house. But if you think about it, they wouldn't be safe forever. While in hiding for about a year, they were only under the Fidelius charm for roughly a week. No one would know how to find them, help them, or bring them supplies. They can no longer speak the secret, so they can't even run out of the house quickly and go down the street to make Bathilda Bagshot a new keeper. They would probably have to wait until they ran out of supplies and then try to make a run to a new hiding place. They would have to abandon their home, putting themselves at an enormous risk as Voldemort and all the Death Eaters were on a hunt for them. In the end, the events probably would have been the same. Voldemort probably would have found them. Lily still would have sacrificed herself to protect Harry, giving him the sacrificial love protection. But Sirius would have been killed along with Harry's parents. Harry would have been a little bit older and potentially able to hold on to the horrible memories of the attack throughout his childhood. This could be a whole what-if series, because without Sirius, there would be no Grimmauld Place, no two-way mirror that helped Dobby get to the trio at Malfoy Manor, and who knows if they would ever even found the locket. Deathly Hallows. The Deathly Hallows were three magical items that some believed to be folklore. There was the Elder Wand, the Invisibility Cloak, and the Resurrection Stone. The Elder Wand is believed to be the most powerful wand in existence. The Invisibility Cloak can hide the wearer and never fade over time. The Resurrection Stone could bring a loved one back to you. In the tale of the three brothers, we hear that death created the three items. Three brothers tricked death using magic and were gifted the items. The phrase, "be careful what you wish for," comes to mind when thinking about the Hallows. The Elder Wand led to bloodshed for many, as fights would often break out trying to become the new owner of the wand. The stone only brought back a pale imitation of lost love, leading to Cadmus ending his own life to join his love in the afterlife. The cloak allowed the third brother to live a long life hidden from death. The cloak would be passed down to the point where you see Harry Potter receiving the cloak. The folklore says that if you were to own all three, you would become the Master of Death. I want to touch on 2 points about the Deathly Hallows. One about the cloak and the other about Christmas. I know that might sound strange, but let me explain. As for the cloak, it seems like the safest of the Hallows. Cadmus and Antinok both pass shortly after receiving their Hallow, while Ignotus goes on to live a long life. However, I have a theory that death had either placed a curse on Ignotus's family line or tormented them through history. We know that the cloak should shield you from death and it's passed down in the family line. By the time Harry gets it, when he's 11 years old, he only has one living bloodline. In fact, He's only a 1-year-old when he's taken to the Dursleys, and his parents were in their early 20s when this all happened. He has no grandparents on either side of his family. We know that wizards live much longer than muggles. Dumbledore at the time of his death was 115. It's strange that he would have no one but Petunia. It's said that James's parents were on the older side when having a child, and they eventually got sick with dragonpox and died within days of each other. Lily's parents were only described as dying a normal muggle death, whatever that means. To me, a curse or punishment from death makes sense as to why Harry Potter lost his whole family before meeting any of them. I also like to think that the curse was broken when Harry Potter died in the forest before returning to life. What do you think? We never really get a great explanation for it. Now for the Christmas thing. In the years Harry attends Hogwarts, the Dursleys only send him 3 Christmas gifts: a 50-pence coin, a toothpick, and a tissue. Terrible gifts from terrible people, right? If you lay them all out together, they almost resemble the Deathly Hallows. The 50 pence represents the stone, the toothpick as the wand, and the tissue as the cloak. Could Petunia have known more than she said? Was she a secret member of the Order of the Phoenix and sending a message? Probably not, but it's still a very interesting connection between the 6 items. Wand and wandless lore. I won't go deep into this topic right now as I plan to create a video about wand lore. As a brief overview, wands are made from a tree with magical properties. They are shaped into different lengths and have a magical core added to them. Ollivander believes that wands chooses the witch or wizard. This is a rare practice among wand makers. Before Ollivander, it was typical for a wizard to pick their own wood and even bring their own core, often items that meant something to the person. Fleur Delacour has a wand that contains a hair from her Vila grandmother. Wandless magic is less discussed in the story. We hear of nonverbal magic or maybe wandless magic while still a child, but not much more than that. Wandless magic tends to be more challenging to perform. It takes a lot more concentration and time to learn. It used to be the norm across the world. When wands were invented, they helped harness the magic and make it easier to perform. There are still places that practice wandless magic. While it might be more tricky, it could be life-saving. Imagine being in a duel and losing your wand. If you knew how to do magic without a wand, you could stay in the fight. It's odd that there isn't a class at Hogwarts that teaches some form of wandless magic. In my head, I pictured it as complex hand and arm movements. Sacrifices. The Harry Potter series is filled with characters willing to make sacrifices. It's a common thing, just as love and death are. We know that Harry's mother makes the ultimate sacrifice by putting her life in front of her son's, and Harry puts his life on the line to protect those at Hogwarts. But several other sacrifices should be discussed in the series. Molly Weasley is one of my favorite characters. She is warm and kind, but also a force not to be reckoned with. In the First Wizarding War, she wasn't part of the Order of the Phoenix, but her 2 brothers were. They both lost their lives fighting Death Eaters. By the time of the Second Wizarding War, she had 7 children. She becomes willing to put herself in front of danger to protect those she loves. When her daughter got caught up in a duel with Bellatrix Lestrange, Voldemort's right hand, she was willing to sacrifice her life for Ginny's. It was a battle that so many others had failed at in the past. But luckily for the Weasley family, Molly had won. Dobby, the house elf, is a lovable character. He was initially enslaved by the Malfoy family before Harry Potter could sneakily free him from their hold. While under the Malfoys' reign, he sacrificed his safety and well-being to sneak out and try to warn Harry about the Chamber of Secrets. Several times, Dobby puts himself at risk to help others. In his final rally, he saved several characters who were being held captive in the Malfoy dungeon. Regulus Black was Sirius's younger brother. He admired Voldemort's power and joined his forces as a Death Eater, and his parents were proud of him for doing that. After some time, he learned just how terrible Voldemort was. He was upset that he was willing to let Creature, the Black's house elf, die while setting up safety measures for his locket Horcrux. At this point, he knew he had to break away from the Death Eaters. This was a sacrifice that sadly his brother Sirius would never know about. He went with Creature to retrieve and destroy the locket, knowing it was a Horcrux. Doing this, he knew he was putting himself in danger and probably the rest of his family. Regulus was pulled into the dark waters by the Inferi, and never seen again. He didn't know how many Horcruxes there were, but he sacrificed his life to ensure Voldemort couldn't return if he was ever killed. Honestly, it breaks my heart a bit thinking that Sirius died thinking his brother was a Death Eater against everything he stood for, when they both ended up dying to save the wizarding kind from Voldemort's terror. Not all sacrifices in the story end up in potential death. Frank and Alice Longbottom ended up in the long-term ward at St. Mungo's. They knew they had to do anything to protect their son, just as Lily and James wanted to protect Harry. Neville Longbottom was a potential option for the Chosen One. I've always imagined that the Longbottoms were in hiding just as the Potters were. It's not something that was ever mentioned, but it would make sense. The Potters were hiding for a year, and only under the Fidelius charm for about a week when they were found. I think the Longbottoms were in hiding for the same time. They never used the Fidelius charm. 3 of the Lestrange clan and Barty Crouch Jr. came for them. Whether it was to find out where the Potters were or trying to find Neville, I can't say for sure. They sacrificed themselves to protect young Neville. They were tortured to the point of hospitalization for the rest of their lives. Neville stayed protected and safe. He grew up with his gran and became a strong, heroic wizard like his parents. Severus Snape made the biggest sacrifice of all of them. I know that not everyone is a fan of Snape because he wasn't the nicest character, but he gave up so much to protect everyone. Snape didn't grow up with a great role model. He was sorted into Slytherin and got bullied throughout school. He messed up the one friendship that ever meant anything to him. Snape will then join the Death Eaters and become a relatively high rank, but when he finds out that Lily Potter, that one friendship from his childhood, is at risk, he jumps at a chance to protect her. She had married one of his school bullies, and he sacrificed his pride to help them both. Unfortunately, due to Peter Pettigrew being a coward, Snape's act didn't help, and Lily and James lost their life. But Harry was still there. Years went by, and he stayed as a teacher at Hogwarts, though the only reason he applied in the first place was because Voldemort ordered him to do so. Without that order, he probably would have never become a teacher, or at least until Harry was a student. If Snape weren't a teacher at that point, I think Dumbledore would have reached out to him to help watch over Harry. So, Snape is stuck in a job he may not want and protects Harry without his knowledge. Nobody would ever know the good things that he has done over the years. They only see the bad. He essentially sacrifices his entire adult life to help Harry, Dumbledore, and the fight to win the war. At the peak of characters hating Snape because they thought he went full Death Eater and killed Dumbledore, he was still trying to protect the students. With Death Eaters running Hogwarts, the Carrows would torture the students when detentions were given. Snape would tell them to have detention in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid, where he knew Hagrid would keep them safe, and there would be distance from the Death Eaters. Honestly, you could probably fill an entire book all about Snape and everything he had to give up. Tier 4. Askaban. Askaban is Great Britain's prison for witches and wizards. It's an unplotted location somewhere in the North Sea. However, it wasn't always a prison, and there's a dark history behind it all. A wizard named Ecrides was the first resident on the island. He used the space to practice the worst kinds of dark magic. He would build a fortress where he would torture and murder muggles. Several concealment charms were hiding him from the Ministry of Magic. Dementors were being bred on the island, and after Ecrides' death and the charms were lifted, the Ministry would find everything. Due to the number of Dementors and the darkness on the island, the Ministry decided to let them stay. It would be better to keep them contained there than let them run loose. Years later, it would become a prison. This decision was made to maintain the international statute of secrecy. Small or local jails for witches and wizards were far too risky if anyone tried to escape. The Dementors would stay as guards to save money and, again, not to worry about relocating them. There are probably additional security protocols within Askaban that aren't mentioned. It's easy to assume that anti-apparition or disapparition charms are placed on the structures. There would probably be some way to keep the witches and wizards from doing wandless magic, though Sirius Black can transform into his animagus form, which seems to be a loophole. There's a crazy range of things you could do to end up in Azkaban. You could also end up there before having a trial, if you even get a trial. Most prisoners would go insane and slowly die, with Dementors constantly looming over them. There's no real way to become reformed being a prisoner there. Only fear would keep a witch or wizard spending a 6-month sentence from reoffending. Witches, like Bellatrix, would never have that fear, so she would never change her ways. Myrtle and the Chamber. When we first meet Moaning Myrtle, she's a ghost within Hogwarts. She can often be found moaning or crying in the bathroom, where she was killed as a student. Moaning Myrtle was born as Myrtle Elizabeth Warren. She attended Hogwarts at the same time as Hagrid and Tom Riddle. Myrtle was attacked when the Chamber of Secrets was open. The basilisk found her and killed her by looking directly into her eyes. She decided not to pass on and become a ghost so she could haunt her school bully. One thing that is never explained is that when the chamber was open again, no one seemed to know that there was a basilisk within. Tom Riddle was the one who opened the chamber, but he blamed Hagrid and his pet Aragog for it. Hagrid gets kicked out of Hogwarts and the school can remain open as Headmaster Dibbit deemed it safe. It's often assumed that no one asked Myrtle how she died, whether it was because they thought it was a rude question or no one cared enough about her to ask, I can't say. We do know that Harry, in his second year, asked Myrtle about it, but all she remembers is that two large yellow eyes were looking at her when she came out of the stall in the bathroom. I think Dumbledore did ask her back then. While he might not have known 100% that it was a basilisk, he would have a good idea that it was. He would have thought that Tom Riddle wouldn't risk opening it again due to the fear that Hogwarts would need to close their doors and he would have to return to the orphanage. Then, years would go by and seemingly Voldemort had fallen, and no one would be left to open the chamber again. I imagine Dumbledore trying to monitor Myrtle's bathroom when the chamber opens again. Even when Lucius Malfoy comes and says the governors have suspended him as headmaster, I think he's still there watching. I go back to Harry's first year when he says, I don't need a cloak to become invisible. Then, in a conversation with Malfoy and Minister Fudge, Dumbledore says, You will find that I will only truly have left the school when none here are loyal to me. You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. This second line is often referred to as Fawkes the Phoenix and how he shows up when Harry displays loyalty when dealing with Tom Riddle and the Basilisk within the Chamber of Secrets. But let's put it all together. The chamber is opened and Myrtle is killed. It remains dormant for 50 years until Ginny starts writing in the diary Horcrux. She becomes possessed, which leads to the attacks within the school. Minister Fudge and Malfoy come to Hogwarts after several attacks. Fudge says they must take Hagrid to Askaban, which is more of a political decision than actual guilt. Malfoy shows that there are 12 votes to have Dumbledore suspended. Dumbledore stays invisible at Hogwarts and watches out for the students. He questions Myrtle about whether she has seen anything. All she knows was that someone had thrown a book at her. He suspects that a Horcrux is in play. McGonagall announces that Dumbledore will be allowed to return to Hogwarts. This could speed up the timeline for whoever has the Horcrux. It does. Horcrux Riddle takes Ginny down into the chamber to allow himself to become fully powered. Harry and Ron react before Dumbledore can pretend to make an entrance coming back into Hogwarts. When he realizes Harry has gone, he sends Fawkes down to the chamber with a sword. He knows that Fawkes can get there faster. He can heal injuries, and the sword can kill the basilisk, and Fawkes can transport them back up to the surface. He knows Harry already faced a weak Voldemort last year, and he probably could again. There might have been some time where he also was watching the chamber, but we know by the time Harry, Ron, Ginny, and Lockhart return, Dumbledore is in McGonagall's office with her and the Weasleys. When entering the office, Dumbledore is described as beaming, while McGonagall is gasping and clutching her chest. He knows. Harry then explains everything, leaving out the part of the diary and Ginny because he didn't want Ginny to get in trouble. When deciding what to say next, he looks at Dumbledore, who says, What interests me most is how Lord Voldemort managed to enchant Ginny when my sources tell me he is currently in hiding in the forest in Albania. He knows. He also hints to Harry that he became the Horcrux that shouldn't have been. You can speak Parseltongue because Lord Voldemort, who is the last remaining descendant of Salazar Slytherin, can speak Parseltongue. Unless I'm much mistaken, he transferred some of his own power to you that night he gave you that scar. Not something he intended to do, I'm sure. I think McGonagall was in the dark about all this, and Myrtle probably didn't fully understand the interest in her in the bathroom, but Dumbledore knew it all and let it play out. I'm sure some of you are thinking how reckless Dumbledore was in letting Hogwarts stay open while he knew what was happening, and I understand that. He had to weigh the odds on what was best long term. I believe he was at each of the attacks, making sure that no one died. The reason behind this thought is when Colin Creevey is found petrified, Dumbledore tells Madame Pomfrey that McGonagall found him on the stairs. But McGonagall will go to say, I shudder to think if Albus hadn't been there on the way downstairs for hot chocolate, who knows what might have happened. This makes it sound like Dumbledore was there first. Dumbledore may have protected each person to make sure they didn't die, while also figuring out how everything was playing out. Half-breeds and blood status. In the wizarding world, some witches and wizards have non-human blood in their genes. Hagrid, for instance, is half human, half giant. Fleur Delacour is part Vila. Fleur seems to be treated no differently than any other witch, and while Hagrid seems to be mostly respected at Hogwarts, some feel differently. The use of half-breeds and blood statuses show that even in the wizarding world, there is discrimination against those dubbed to certain individuals as different. Dolores Umbridge is a prime example. She looks down on those she thinks are different. Umbridge shouts at the centaurs in the forest, filthy half-breeds, beast, uncontrolled animals. She even lies about her own blood status, saying she's pure blood. In reality, she's half-blood. There's also the portrait of Mrs. Black, Sirius's mother, who shouts, stains of dishonor, filthy half-breeds, blood traitors, children of filth. As I mentioned, Hagrid seems to be mostly respected at Hogwarts, but Rita Skeeter shakes things up for him when she writes in an article about him being a half-giant. Some people end up being worried that he might have a savage side to him due to the giant in him. Anyone who knows Hagrid well could tell you that he wouldn't hurt a fly. His father raised him after his giantess mother left him. He was brought up as a kind and loving man, but his status caused certain fears for some. There is also a wizarding slur, mudbloods, which is like saying someone has dirty blood. They aren't pure-blooded. Draco Malfoy used this regarding Hermione Granger, who was Muggle-born. Some family lines believe so much in blood purity that they end up marrying into families they are already related to. If we look at Sirius Black, his mother is also his second cousin once removed. On the flip side of this hate, some rally behind those who need their voices heard. Hermione creates a group to help house elves, and Newt Scamander writes a book on educating the less informed. There is always a light in the darkness. The four elements. It's not a big leap to think that the four houses at Hogwarts are related to the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. There's even an admission to it in an original Pottermore article. It's in the article about colors, and it states that the house colors were chosen with the four elements in mind. Gryffindor is red and gold, representing fire. Slytherin is green and silver, representing water. Hufflepuff is yellow and black, representing earth. And finally, Ravenclaw is blue and bronze, representing air. Hufflepuff is associated with earth. Earth is the most grounded element. Its cool and dry nature provides a comfortable living space for plants and animals. The earth symbol gives a sense of duty, responsibility, and reliability. Earth signs tend to be dependable, practical, and conservative. Hufflepuffs are noted as having the following traits: loyalty, hardworking, patience, and fairness. The Hufflepuff common room is on the ground floor, representing being on the level of Earth. Many Hufflepuffs are known for being herbologists or zoologists. Ravenclaw is associated with air. Air is the element of all life. It's required for all living creatures and plants to live. The air symbol gives a sense of intellect. Air signs tend to be alert, curious, and perspective. Ravenclaws are noted as having the following traits: wisdom, acceptance, intelligence, and creativity. The Ravenclaw common room is located in one of the towers, representing being high in the air. Many Ravenclaws are known for being teachers or authors. Gryffindor is associated with fire. Fire is considered the first element created on Earth. Fire is warm but dry, giving light for protection and warmth for comfort. The fire symbol gives a sense of being larger than life. Fire signs tend to be self-sufficient, spontaneous, and have a zest for life. Gryffindors are noted as having the following traits: daring, chivalry, bravery, and determination. The Gryffindor common room is located in one of the towers, representing how heat from a fire rises. Many Gryffindors are known for working for the Ministry of Magic in more dangerous roles, like auras or curse breakers. Slytherin is associated with water. Water has a cool and wet nature. The water symbol gives a sense of being, fluid, flowing, wavering. Water signs tend to be intuitive and sensitive. Slytherins are noted as having the following traits: cunning, resourcefulness, determination, and self-preservation. The Slytherin common room is located in the dungeons, representing being underwater. Many Slytherins are known for working in the Ministry of Magic in a political role, or as masters in potions or spells. Voldemort's hesitation. In the late evening of October 31st, 1981, Voldemort discovers where the Potters were hiding. Peter Pettigrew gave up their location as their secret keeper. He came to their house to kill the Chosen One. He failed in his attempt but managed to kill both parents, Lily and James. Lily sacrificed her life to protect her son, which gave him the love bond protection. Voldemort was ripped from his body and left to wander due to his Horcruxes, keeping his soul on Earth. Many people question why James's death wouldn't have activated the love bond protection for Harry, or maybe even Lily too. James was never meant to be spared, but Lily was. Voldemort is not afraid to kill those in his way, and James is something that was in his way. Lily was meant to be spared, leaving her as the sole survivor. Voldemort told her to move aside, but she begged him to kill her instead of her son. She refused to stop shielding Harry. Again and again, he told her to step aside, until he decided to kill her to get her out of the way of Harry. You may question why he would even give her the chance to step aside when he just killed James without a thought. He was going to spare her because Severus Snape. Snape was in love with Lily, though he never told her. He knew he would never have her, but he still cared for her and wanted her to be safe. Snape was the one who brought part of the prophecy to Voldemort. However, I doubt he knew Lily was pregnant at the time. After Peter Pettigrew started relaying the information on the Order of the Phoenix to Voldemort, it was discovered that 2 sets of Order members had a child that fit the prophecy. He landed on Harry Potter. Snape would then go to Dumbledore for help. Dumbledore would ask Snape, "If she means so much to you, surely Lord Voldemort will spare her. Did you not ask for mercy for the mother in exchange for the son?" Snape tells him that he has, which disgusts Dumbledore. "You do not care, then, about the death of her husband and child? They can die as long as you have what you want?" Snape will tell him to hide them all, keep them safe. He tells Dumbledore he would give anything to help. We know Snape asked Voldemort to spare Lily, so he gave her several chances to move. Voldemort wouldn't have done this because Snape loved her, as he knows nothing about love. Snape would have had to tell him a lie to make it seem like she was more important. He probably would have said how strong of a witch she was, how amazing she was at potions, and that she could be an asset to their cause if they could flip her. If anything, she would have insider information. I bet you if she was spared, Snape would have defected then, gone to her aid, and helped her in any way that he could have. Voldemort agreed with whatever Snape had told him. He would spare her. However, she would not fold. I believe that, for a brief moment, Voldemort hesitates to decide to kill Lily. He was internally weighing the options. He knew this could potentially affect Snape's loyalty. He could be losing a new asset. And would it show a weakness if he didn't do it? He gave her 5 warnings before using his wand. 5. I think that's saying something. Tier 5. Luna Lovegood. Luna Lovegood is a fun, loving, quirky character we meet a few years into Harry's time at Hogwarts. She is a fan favorite for many people. So, why did I put her on the iceberg? What lies under the surface? Luna is an important part of the story because she represents the outsider, someone who is different and thinks outside of the box. She's okay with being just the way she is and doesn't try to change herself. Luna is strong yet gentle. She's a daydreamer and a fighter. Luna has managed to see the light even in the darkest of places. She unexpectedly loses her mother when she's only 9 years old. While at Hogwarts, other students call her Loony Lovegood. People steal her belongings as pranks, but somehow, with so much weight on her shoulders, she's airy, she can float. Her character shows us that it's okay to think differently and to put yourself out there. Maybe things won't always work out, but it's worth trying. There will be others out there who are accepting of you, and you shouldn't settle for less. Gilderoy Lockhart. Gilderoy Lockhart is a good laugh. He seems so out of place as a Hogwarts professor. He has several books about adventures and knowledge. He's an attractive wizard with a most charming smile, and yet it's all fake. Lockhart is just incredible at memory charms, stealing stories of others and passing them off as his own. So why on earth does Dumbledore hire him for the DADA position? It's not because of his knowledge, let's be honest. He doesn't know enough to teach a single class, let alone a whole year. Dumbledore knows of the DADA curse and uses it to his advantage. He lines up professors who can teach Harry something to help him grow into the wizard he needs to become to defeat Voldemort. So what on earth can Lockhart teach Harry? Fame and glory are not everything. You do not need to boast about your accomplishments. Don't get a big head. Don't be showy. Do what is right and not what is easy. Lockhart can show Harry how not to be. Plus, Dumbledore probably knew some of the witches and wizards who he stole stories from, and wouldn't mind seeing him taken down a peg or two. Ariana Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore once had a younger sister named Ariana. She died very young during a three-way duel between Albus, Aberforth, and Grindelwald. A stray spell hit her and ended her life. It's a very sad story, and not one of the three knew whose spell actually hit her. The two Dumbledore brothers held on to that pain and guilt their whole lives. Her story is far more tragic than just dying young. One day, when Ariana was only 6, 3 Muggle boys wanted her to perform magic, but she couldn't. At such a young age, you can't control what you can and cannot do, but they had seen her do it before while looking through the hedges. They attacked her. We don't know what exactly they did, but whatever it was scared her for the rest of her life. She was never the same little girl again. Ariana began to suppress her magic, which can lead to becoming an obscurial. The suppression starts to make her mad, and sometimes the magic would explode out of her. Her father went after the Muggle boys for what they did. This landed him in Askaban, but he never explained why he attacked the boys. He wanted to protect Ariana from getting locked up in St. Mungo's for being a danger to the public. The Dumbledore family moved into a new house and tried to keep her safe and calm. Rumors then began about the family. When Ariana was about 14, she had one of her fits, and this time, she accidentally killed her mother. Aberforth watched after her, but it would come to the point where Albus would have to take over so he could return to Hogwarts. This is where the fight would start that led to her death. Aberforth thought maybe she was trying to help and couldn't control herself, and then the stray spell hit. There are a lot of sad stories in the Harry Potter series, but this one hits hard. She was so young and did nothing wrong. She became a shell of herself and lost her father and her mother, had no friends, and her brothers were also too young to take care of her in the ways that she needed. She represents so much pain and loss that is felt by others for years. Nagini. Nagini is a mysterious character. In the original series, we only knew her as Voldemort's Horcrux, someone who followed orders and attacked those against the Death Eaters. Then, the Fantastic Beasts series came out, giving us more story. It's suspected she originally came from Indonesia. She was a Maledictus, a rare curse-like ability to transform into another form. Nagini could transform into a snake. However, as a Maledictus, at some point, she will no longer be able to turn back into her human form. Whether by choice or necessity, Nagini joined a traveling circus, where she would have a transformation act. Credus Barebone, aka Aurelius Dumbledore, would help her escape that life. They would go on a search together to try to find the truth about his past. Credence would end up joining the forces of Grindelwald, but Nagini wanted to hold back. She ended up joining the good side with Newt and Dumbledore. Things get fuzzy here. At some point, she will no longer to become human again, and she will join the side of Voldemort. Knowing that she didn't want to join Grindelwald, it might sound odd that she joined Voldemort. We know that Voldemort spent time in Albania. This might be where he met Nagini. Assuming she had been there for a while, stuck as a snake, Voldemort would have been a welcome relief, as he would be the only one who could speak with her. Imagine being isolated from everyone for years and finally speaking with someone. Voldemort in his youth as Tom Riddle was known to be a very charismatic fella. It wouldn't be hard for him to sway a lonely woman snake to join him. He probably would have fed her half-truths to lure her to his side. Honestly, Nagini could have her own mini-series to fill in the blanks. The Black Sisters. Once upon a time, there were three pure-blooded sisters, Andromeda, Narcissa, and Bellatrix. They belonged to the noble and ancient house of Black. Those in the Black family typically get sorted into the Slytherin house at Hogwarts. There were claims that the entire family line were all pure-blooded witches and wizards. However, this was untrue. Those dubbed blood traitors or squibs were removed from the family tree to maintain appearances. Due to some deep-seated beliefs, it is said that the Blacks could only marry another pureblood. Bellatrix would go on to marry Rodolphus Lestrange. She seemed indifferent about him. They only married to keep up the family traditions. She was much more enamored by Voldemort. Bellatrix would go on to die at the hands of someone who was the complete opposite of her. Someone who loved fiercely and would do anything for her family. She would be killed by Molly Weasley. Narcissa would marry Lucius Malfoy. They had similar values in life regarding blood purity, wealth, and status. While Bellatrix had a loveless marriage, it was different for Narcissa. She would build a life with Lucius and have a son named Draco. Lucius would become a Death Eater, like his sister-in-law Bellatrix, and Narcissa was more of a sideline supporter. Ultimately, she realized what really mattered in life and did whatever she could to protect her family. Narcissa, Lucius, and Draco would all survive the war. Andromeda married a Muggle-born wizard named Ted Tonks. For this, the Black family disowned her. She seems to be a well-rounded witch who loved the family she built. Andromeda and Tonks would go on to have a daughter, Nymphadora. Nymphadora would become an Auror and later a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Andromeda's story has a bit of a sad ending, as she would lose her daughter, son-in-law, and husband all to the war. She would, however, go on to raise her grandson. Three sisters, all raised in the same house and taught the same values, end up in very different places in life. This is a prime example of being able to take control of your own life and make it what you want it to be. Tier 6. Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised is a fascinating artifact. If you were the happiest, most fulfilled person, you would see yourself just the way you are in the mirror. Most people will see themselves in a way they most desire. Harry Potter sees his whole extended family, whom he had never gotten to know. Ron Weasley sees himself standing above his older brothers, winning accommodations, and finally being seen for his accomplishments. The exact time the mirror was created is unknown, and it's also unknown how it ended up in Hogwarts. It had been in the room of requirement for at least a century when Dumbledore moved it into an empty classroom for Harry to find. Dumbledore warns Harry about the mirror, saying people have lost themselves staring into it. They could become delusional or lose track of reality. The mirror is similar to another set of artifacts, the Deathly Hallows. The Resurrection Stone has the ability to bring a shadow of a person back from death. This is like Harry seeing his family in the mirror. The Elder Wand was given to the man who wanted to be more powerful than others. This is kind of like what Ron sees, him beating out his brothers in a more tame sense. Then there's the Invisibility Cloak. This one reminds me of how Harry got the Philosopher's Stone. Harry was able to retrieve an item without being seen. Could the mirror have been created by Death or the Peveril brothers? Or maybe the Peveril brothers saw their desires in the mirror and then made the hollows. It's an interesting idea to think about. The Veil. The Veil is probably the artifact that I find most interesting. It's been said that it's been inside of the Ministry of Magic for as long as the Ministry has existed, almost alluding to the idea that they built around the Veil to conceal it. The room where the Veil was held is called the Death Chamber. The room appeared to be rectangular in shape, with rows of benches going around all the sides. In the center stood the veil on a stone dais. This room reminds Harry of the courtroom he was taken to over the summer for the use of underage magic. The veil was a grand archway with a tattered black curtain swaying in the wind, which no one could feel. You might get the feeling that someone was on the other side of the curtain, hearing slight whispers or murmurs. You could walk around the veil to the other side and not see anything you heard or felt. Hermione was scared of the archway and urged them to move on. Harry was drawn to it. He wanted to walk through it. Luna could hear the whispers too. Ginny and Neville became entranced as well. It makes you wonder why Harry and Luna could hear the whispers. Is it because they were closer to death in the sense that they had lost loved ones? Was the other side calling to them? Were Ginny and Neville entranced because they believed in the afterlife? And perhaps logical Hermione didn't? Like the Mirror of Erised, it is a rather dangerous artifact. During the battle at the Department of Mysteries, Bellatrix Lestrange hit Sirius Black with a spell. Sirius would fall through the veil never to be seen again. Whether you're a book reader, movie watcher, or both, this moment is heartbreaking across all fields. Harry would later speak to Nearly Headless Nick about death. He will explain that most people choose to move on to where he could not say as he stayed here as a ghost. But, as Dumbledore once said, death is but the next great adventure. On a different note, there's also a theory that the Ministry used the veil as a form of execution, which is why the room looked like a courthouse. This would be pre-Askaban. I can always dive into that theory in another video. Moody's Eye. Alastor Moody is a famous Auror who takes down several dark wizards. During one of his battles, he loses his right eye and receives a magical eye replacement. We know very little about this eye. It appears to be bright blue. It can see 360 degrees. It can see through skin and bone, as he can see things on the other side of his skull. And seemingly, he can see through the invisibility cloak. There are only theories as to where the eye came from. It seems to be on the same level of creation as the Deathly Hallows or the Mirror of Erised. There's one bright blue eye we come across in the Wizarding world that seems like it could be a fit. In the Fantastic Beasts series, we see Gellert Grindelwald with one bright blue eye. When we see him again in prison in the Harry Potter series, his eyes are the same color. It wouldn't be a big leap to say that Moody's magical eye was once Grindelwald's. But then, that leads to where Grindelwald got the eye. This is something on my list to make a video about, but I'll throw a few theories out there in this video. Stay tuned for a deep dive later on. 1. The Three Sisters of Fate's eye. 2. The Eye of Horus. 3. A Cyclops eye. Or 4. A Fey eye. Room of Requirement. The Room of Requirement, another mystery. It's located within Hogwarts. It's a secret, unplottable room that morphs into what is needed for those who can find it. You must walk past it 3 times, focusing on what you need, and then a door will appear. It could be as small as a broom cupboard if you needed to hide, say, from Filch, or a giant room with items towering high for when you need to hide something. The first video I uploaded on this channel covered the Room of Requirement. I believe that Ravenclaw had created the room to explore their creativity and expand their minds. Books or materials they needed would appear there, ready for them. What the room would become over time is not what I think she intended it to be. I can imagine her wanting a professor to hide her empty sherry bottles in a room made for further education. Department of Mysteries. The British Ministry of Magic has several departments on multiple levels. Within the ministry was the Department of Mysteries, which was essentially the secret government research department. Most ministry members didn't even know what was held within this department. Employees in the section were called the Unspeakables for their vow of silence on what they saw inside. The entrance to the department was a black, windowless room designed to confuse outsiders. Unmarked doors were spread out in a circular room. If you were to open a door and want to try another, the room would spin, so you wouldn't know which door you wanted to try next. There are 6 doors we know where they lead, and 6 we don't. The brain room is a long rectangular room with an entrance door and a second door leading to the death chamber. Aside from a few desks and a large glass tank in the middle, it's mostly empty. Within that tank, there is a deep green liquid and several brains floating around. If you try to remove a brain from the tank, the brain will entangle you with its tendrils of thoughts, which can lead to a rather dangerous consequence. This room is used to study the concept of thought. To me, that means studying imagination, consciousness, emotions, and why people have certain behaviors. The fact that it's also attached to the death chamber makes me think, well, something kind of dark. Real life scientists removed Ted Bundy's brain to study why he was such a horrendous killer. I wonder if, in the wizarding world, they also perform such experiments on prisoners before putting them through the veil. The Hall of Prophecy is a large room filled with aisles and aisles of shelves. On these shelves are glass spheres containing prophecies. Each prophecy has a label with the initials of the seer and to whom it was told to. Then, spelled out, is who the prophecy involves. We don't know exactly how the spheres get filled, but a seer typically goes into a trance state. So I don't believe it would be them. There must be some sort of automatic magic involved there. We've already dove into the death chamber when discussing the veil, so I'm going to skip covering it again here. The love room is typically locked up tight and considered to be rather dangerous. Within the room is a well or fountain containing love potions. It's believed that unspeakables take the potion to study its effects. The potion is considered to be dangerous because of the actions it can make one do. It's on a similar level as the Imperious Curse. The space chamber is a dark room with floating planetary models. At first glance, you might think this room is for studying the planets or the stars, but I think it's more than that. We know that the centaurs study the sky as a form of divination. This room could be a way of forming prophecies or a form of astrology. But what I think it's really doing is studying where the planets, moons, stars, and sun are at any given point and how it affects magic. There's different lores of magic, and several include the position of the moon or the planets. You have to adjust how you complete certain spells based on the alignment of the sky. Some magic would be stronger or weaker during the cycles of the moon. The time room is filled with clocks of all shapes and sizes. It has a huge crystal bell jar emitting a sparkling light. Different time turners were encased within a glass shelving unit. This room would also lead to the Hall of Prophecies and some small offices. This room was used to study the mystery of time, which is probably why it was connected to the Hall of Prophecies, as a prophecy could be given years before it comes true. The bell jar appears to somehow harness time. Within the jar was a small hummingbird that would hatch from its egg, mature, and fly up. Then, on its way back down, reverse and become an egg again. Could this jar have helped create time turners? Perhaps the harnessed time could be put into the hourglass of the time turners. There are 6 other doors from the main entrance hall. We have never been told what these rooms are, or whether the doors even work. For all we know, a brick wall could be behind the doors. This is just a guess and by no means canon, but here's what I think could be an option for what's in the other rooms. Room 1. Herbology. I would not be surprised to find a room dedicated to studying the magical properties of plants and fungi. They would also be doing experiments like creating hybrid plants. Room 2. Alchemy. There has to be a room on alchemy. I mean, we learn of the Philosopher's Stone and Nicholas Flamel in Harry's first year. It's not a far leap to think that the ministries would study it. Room 3. Ancient magic. There is little known about ancient magic in canon. Hogwarts Legacy opens a door more on it, but it has yet to be confirmed as canon. However, I think that the writers and creators of the game did beautifully in putting existing lore into the story. We know that sacrificial protection was a form of ancient magic. Hogwarts also had certain protections as well. Other than that, we don't know much. It would make sense to have a room dedicated to it within the Department of Mysteries. It would almost be like a Hall of History, a way to protect the knowledge of older and more powerful magic. Room 4. Abilities. Some witches and wizards are born with special abilities. These abilities are seemingly rare, but could be passed down in bloodlines. Tonks is an example. She can morph, which is passed down to her son. Now, to be able to study it, I think there's probably some memory magic at play, as the unspeakables would not want whatever they're doing to get out. But it would make sense to want to understand why some witches and wizards are born with enhancements. Room 5. Mirror Realms. In the Fantastic Beasts series, we see Dumbledore use possibly some form of illusion magic, but goes into a mirror realm. It's like a pocket world. There would be many benefits of studying mirror realms. Room 6. Muggle Affairs. Now I know this one sounds probably odd, and you might be thinking there's already a different department dealing with Muggle matters, but hear me out. This room would be more like a secretive security spy room. I imagine tons of crystal balls showing views of places worldwide, like Wizarding World CCTV. Maybe it would actually just be the Greater British area, since that's where their government is. They would monitor things happening outside their world and in the Muggle world to see if anything could affect them or if they needed to step in on any matters outside. Tier 7. This tier will primarily consist of theories. At this point in the story, we are missing a lot of information and can only guess the backstories. Ancient Magic. So in the last tier, I mentioned ancient magic. From what we know, ancient magic includes long-forgotten protection spells, but what else does it include? Here are a few types of magic I think would fall under that umbrella. Time magic, blood magic, sense or location magic, astral projection, or maybe even natural magic, like plant and weather manipulation. Banning of spells. There's only a handful of things we know are banned in the wizarding world. 3 spells are unforgivable. There's also a ban on experimental breeding of magical creatures. Underage sorcery is prohibited. Non-humans are not allowed to use wands. And you can't keep a XXXXX creature as a pet. There are so many things that should be banned, but for some strange reason, they aren't. For an example, why are love potions allowed? It's very similar to the Imperious Curse, as you can't really think for yourself under the influence. Sectum Sempra could be a lethal curse if you don't immediately use a counter curse. Just because it's not immediate death like Avada Kedavra doesn't mean it should be used. The Punishment Quill seems like something that should never be allowed in Hogwarts, let alone anywhere. Also, taboo. How is it legal to put a taboo on a name? Something that breaks all protections and allow the speaker to be found. I can think of some reasons why they aren't banned, but it's a flaw in the system. Sectum Sempra and the Punishment Quill are both made for personal use. As far as I know, when a spell or invention is created, you don't need to register it. So because only a handful of people may know about it, it goes under the radar. Hence, there's no ban. For the love potions, my best guess is it's too easy to make, so to save space in Askaban, they let it slide. I'm sure there would be some kind of punishment or maybe some memory charm action going on to fix things, but not banned. Also, since there's a love room in the Department of Mysteries, they might allow the use of love potions so they can study it out in the wild. Taboo not being banned might be because they just can't. If it's being tabooed for an evil reason, like putting it on Voldemort's name, it would take a team of well-trained Aurors to go after the person who placed the spell. It'd be too risky. And maybe that's why it's not banned, out of fear. Grindelwald's remorse. Hermione Granger once explained that the only way to put yourself back together when splitting yourself for a Horcrux is to have remorse. Remorse. You've really got to feel what you've done. Apparently, the pain of it can destroy you. Now, I'm not saying Grindelwald had a Horcrux, though he may have, but at the end of Grindelwald's life, he showed that he was remorseful. Grindelwald had a saying, for the greater good. It was just his justification for trying to seize control of the wizarding world and becoming a ruler of the world where wizards are on top and muggles are at the bottom. In his youth, he had a budding relationship with Albus Dumbledore. There was some love between them, though it seemed like a rather unhealthy love. Dumbledore had lost his sister during the three-way duel with his brother and Grindelwald, and that's where the rip in their relationship starts. Over the years, Grindelwald created a rank of witches and wizards who would help him to try to achieve his evil plans, but by 1945 he would be taken down during an epic duel with Dumbledore. He would be held as a prisoner in Numagard. Ironically, Numagard Castle was built under Grindelwald's orders to keep his opponents in. He was imprisoned for 53 years when in 1998, Voldemort found him inside his cell. He was searching for the Elder Wand, which Grindelwald knew Dumbledore had. He did not hand over the truth, and for that, he lost his life. When Harry Potter was in limbo speaking with Dumbledore, Harry told him about Grindelwald. Dumbledore would go on to say, "They say he showed remorse in later years, alone in his cell in Numagard. I hope that is true. I would like to think that he did feel the horror and shame of what he had done. Perhaps that lie to Voldemort was his attempt to make amends, to prevent Voldemort from taking the Hallow." But then Harry would add, "Or maybe from breaking into your tomb." Grindelwald, who had caused havoc across several countries, could feel what he had done years ago. He knew what love felt like, and for that, he was different from Voldemort. By no means am I saying that Grindelwald was better than Voldemort. They were both terrible wizards in the actions they did in their lifetimes. I think it's an interesting comparison, though. Grindelwald would likely have an afterlife, while Voldemort will forever be that small, flayed, gross body curled up in limbo alone. Spell inventions. There are a lot of spells taught at Hogwarts, but we don't know exactly how they're created. However it is done, it's probably complex. We know that sadly Luna lost her mother when she was only 9 due to her experimenting with spells, so spell creation can also be very dangerous. In his time, Severus Snape created several spells, including Sectum and the Muffliato charm. These were both created during his time as a student, showing that at a young age he was brilliant and possibly a bit careless due to the potential mishaps that could happen. So, how did he do it? Well, I think it starts with intentions. Let's use the charm Accio as an example. What are you trying to accomplish? You want to bring an item to you or summon it. Now you need an incantation or a word to use. Accio was chosen as it translates to the word summon, call, or action in Latin. Then you need a wand movement. A half circle or a rainbow-like movement was chosen. This might have been selected for the whipping or snagging motion. Now you have to put it all together. I believe that with new spells, you must be very clear with what you are trying to accomplish. You can't go using it half-heartedly. This is possibly where issues or accidents can happen. You can't be trying to summon a plate while thinking about the sandwich you're about to make. You need to stay 100% focused on bringing the plate to you and only that. Once the intentions, incantations, and wand movements are perfected, you've accomplished creating a new spell. You can now teach it to others. It seems that the full intentions might not have to be known to new users when attempting to use your spells. Or at least it seems that way when Harry Potter tried to use Snape's spell, Sectum Sempra. He knew it was a spell to use against your enemies, but did not know it was going to slice open Draco, nearly killing him, if Snape didn't find him in time. If you know the full intentions, you can control the use of the spell. Sectum Sempra was later used during the Battle of Seven Potters. Originally aimed at a Death Eater's hand, this spell ended up hitting George's ear, slicing it off, but he was not at risk of bleeding out like Draco almost did. The slice was meant to be a single swipe to injure, not kill. This shows how important it is to have clear intentions in your mind. Mental strength of magic. Now, this might be a debatable topic, but I believe that a witch's or wizard's mental strength or toughness will affect their use of magic. Mental toughness refers to a mental state capable of being meaningful, purposeful, and flexible when trying to achieve a goal. So hear me out. As a first-year student at Hogwarts, you might find yourself nervous about the new environment. You enter your first class knowing nothing, and then you're instructed to do your first spell. You say the spell, and you wave your wand, and nothing happens. You think, why can't I do it? It's because you are not confident in your actions. In Charms class, when doing Wingardium Leviosa, most students seem to have troubles with a basic spell, but Hermione gets it on her first try. Yes, Hermione is an intelligent girl, but she's confident in herself. She can do it, and so she does. Now let's look at when there's flying lessons. Harry had been looking forward to flying more than anything else. We also know that Hermione was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something that couldn't be learned by heart out of a book, not that she hadn't tried. She had been trying to read tips from Quidditch through the ages, but she was still nervous. When the lesson begins, they are told to stand beside a broomstick and say, "Up." Harry, who is happy and excited to learn to fly, has his broom jump into his hand at once. Hermione's did a little roll on the ground and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Harry then thinks, perhaps brooms like horses could tell when you were afraid. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Neville and Hermione's fear and nervousness made it harder for them to be able to have the broom lift. Harry thinks about how badly he wants to learn to fly and be up in the air, and he gets it right away. Now let's jump forward in time to when Harry tries to use Crucio on Bellatrix. Bellatrix had hit Sirius with a spell and he went through the veil. Harry, filled with hatred, shouted Crucio at her. Bellatrix did scream and was knocked off her feet, but it did not have the expected effects of Crucio on her. She responds to him yelling, "Never used an unforgivable curse before, have you, boy? You have to mean them, Potter. You really need to want to cause pain, to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long." Harry was in a dark place, unable to cope with what had just happened to Sirius. He could not perform such an evil, complex spell, even on the person who took Sirius away from him. He did not have the mental strength to do it at that time. We also know that Harry can have the mental toughness to perform an unforgivable curse. He uses Imperio more than once when breaking into Gringotts Bank, so he is capable of it in the right state. We also know that he can cast spells that inflict potentially deadly damage, as he used Sectum Sempra. Granted, he didn't know what kind of damage that spell would cause when he used it, but he still successfully cast it. He had been thinking about and wanting to try out that spell for days when he used it on Draco. Let's also look at Neville for a quick moment. Neville at the start of Hogwarts had so much trouble when trying to do anything with magic. Some of you might be thinking it's because he had his father's wand, so it didn't work correctly for him. But remember, even before Hogwarts, before having a wand, his family thought he might be a squib. When Neville was born, he performed magic within minutes. He was able to make his blanket more snug around him, but his family didn't notice. When you're little, your magic often will come and go randomly since you can't control it. Neville's family missed his moments, so they thought he couldn't do magic. This caused a very early lack of confidence in himself. His family didn't end up seeing him use magic until the day he accidentally was dropped out of a window and was able to save himself by bouncing. For years, he was thought of as not a wizard, even though his parents were amazing at performing magic. Neville clung to that lack of self-confidence even when entering school. Yes, the year Neville really started to shine was the year he got a new wand, but it was before he got it. Neville began to believe in himself. He became closer to other students when joining Dumbledore's army. He saw that he wasn't alone in not knowing everything. He was given a healthy space to learn and had people cheering him on. He gained confidence in himself and found a cause to stand for. He begins to show mental toughness. Then he goes on to break his wand, or rather, Death Eater breaks his wand and his nose, but Neville still goes after them. So there you have it, my version of the Harry Potter iceberg. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video or want to support the channel, please consider giving a like or drop a comment. You can also subscribe for more videos. I'll be back again soon with another video, but until then, keep enjoying the magic.